My name is Sidney Hargro, and I graduated from high school in 1983. Went to graduate school at Ohio State. I got a master's degree in engineering there. That is where it was during that time where I met my now wife, Lisa, and had our first child, Jesse, and then later Jada while we were in Ohio. So that basically took me out of North Carolina. We lived there for a number of years until my youngest Jada was in preschool and Jesse was in first grade. We moved to Haddonfield in 2009. And so that was what brought us to the East Coast. I didn't know anything at all about Haddonfield, anything at all about this area. The job that I took was running a startup foundation that was based in this town called Haddonfield, and I had no idea where it was. I remember arriving to just check out the town, and it was during the summer when the festivals were going on. It's like, oh, this is really cool, right? A lot of people, activity. So we didn't know much about the town at the time and really didn't understand what we're going into. We even thought about living in Philadelphia and just having me, come over here to work. But we ultimately decided to move here primarily because it was the first time that we had experienced a walkable town. Living in Ohio, you have to get in a car to go everywhere, right? Grocery store, it doesn't matter. You have to get into a car to go to get anything that you need. Living here, you could also not only walk, but also that you're being very close to Philadelphia, very close to DC, very close to New York. It just made it that's what we were focused on, more so than what we were walking in. I just really wanted a great educational experience. I didn't want them to have to experience anything remotely like what I did in elementary school. I didn't expect the more blatant racism that I experienced, but I didn't also want the more subtle racism either. I knew that they both were very bright kids coming even at that early age. And so I just wanted them to be affirmed for who they are and kind of get comfortable in their skin. Where we moved from in Ohio was a very diverse neighborhood. They went to a very, very diverse Montessori school. So they were used to being accepted and kind of for who they were, right? And they were able to be themselves. And so my primary concern was that this was a scenario where they would go into what was considered a public school scenario, and I didn't know exactly what they would experience. Yeah. At the time when we moved here, there might have been one or two kids of color at all, and maybe not another child that was either Black or biracial in their class. So literally they were very they were not in a scene where they saw themselves every day. And so that was a major difference. Whereas in my case, even though I grew up in this setting and had to I had very close friends and even teachers, right, that where I could see myself in them. So that was a major difference. On the positive side was that they still got a chance to walk to school. Right, just like I did. They didn't like the fact that I walked them to school, but it was great for them to have that same type of experience of not having to get on a bus to go to elementary school. I think another difference was obviously in the teachers. Again, like I said, I grew up around in an era when there were abundance of Black teachers that were in the schools. So I at least, even if they weren't my teacher, I knew they were there. So again, I could see myself in that particular scenario. So that was something that was different for them. And then the final thing, again, their own friend group, right? Yeah. They had great friends, right? And they were the only one that looked like themselves in that friend group. Birthday parties, they were usually the only person of color in that setting. We would take trips different places into Philadelphia, and we'd go to places where they would see art or see some element of history or something where they could see themselves. But it almost felt like doing it as a tourist. Yeah. right?
Yeah.
It didn't feel. I think I could have done a better job of really making it seem like this is not us going to pay a ticket to see, like this is you, right? This is actually who you are. And that's something that was a challenge for us to do. We tried our best to have, make sure that Thanksgiving was a time for family and connection, whether we were traveling, which most of the time we did, we would travel to North Carolina, or whether we're having it here. Traditions, family traditions, we tried to find ways to create our own family traditions, which was something that was important as well. While they were having their experience, I was having my own experience of living in a place that was very different than where I had lived before, which I can talk about later. But for them, it was more subtle. People always touching their hair, always, assuming that they can like be in their personal space in that way, having comments about their hair that happened often, and just other. I think early on I wouldn't necessarily say the intent was around bullying, but it was clearly that they were different and that they were treated different, and sometimes that different was seen as other and not what you should be. That was more the earlier experience. My Jesse, my oldest child, had a very, not the same, but a similar experience to me where, they both came to school from Montessori school. In Montessori school in Ohio, because the age groups were broken up into 0 to 3, 3 to 6, you got to operate at the pace that you wanted to. So by the time they showed up at the first grade, his first year here, he was in the first grade, and he was bored. He was incredibly bored. And they didn't know necessarily what to do with it, right? And because there were things that they had experienced in Ohio that they really didn't have a chance to think about until second grade or third grade. And so that caused us to have a lot of time, and energy around trying to make sure that a child like that got different work and not just additional work, because additional work felt like punishment, right? Yeah, do this as that which is the normal level of work, but do this other work on top of it. Like that wasn't fair to him. So it took us a while I think by the third grade, they believed us. And so things started to shift a bit there. I think middle school was certainly one, I'm pretty sure it was middle school where my daughter had the experience of being in a classroom and have them, it was, I guess they were talking about the 60s and the civil rights movement, and it just dawned on her the age of her aunts and grandparents at that time, and that what she was watching as history was actually right there as a part of her life. That's when it really, I think that impacted her significantly. And then I would say the last and one of the most memorable moments where they felt different or understood the impact of being different was right after George Floyd's murder in 2020, where the junior class decided to support Black Lives Matter as their nonprofit charitable project. And the amount of division and the statements that were written and said in the Haddonfield Sun, I think it was, the editorials back and forth, and even in one case having one of them named, like that was really challenging. But I will say, to the credit of the rest of the students that surround them, their friends had their backs, right? Their friends really, and they're still close now. So it was a scenario where they weren't alone. The students were surrounding them. It was really the adults in the town where there was a major issue. Well, I never really thought that there was any physical potential for physical harm
Right.
to them. They both participated in elementary school in Odyssey of the Mind. And that was a scenario where kids would get together and they would come up with these projects under the Odyssey of the Mind project in New Jersey. And it was a place where they really got to be themselves, and they got to be both creative and analytical and this and that. They really shined alongside others that they were with. And they found friends, right? The other one was in theater, plays and plays theater. They were in that throughout all the way until high school. I think it was till high school, certainly through middle school. And again, once you find your people, so to speak, once you find people that support you, once you find people who accept you, friends or who you know who accept you for who you are, that's when I think that those are communities that they found a lot of comfort. And in their friend groups, they both had the value of having really, really close friends. And I mean close friends that stood up for them a number of times. So I think that which I think says a lot about really kind of the positive aspects of the schools, even especially in high school. I think in high school, they both really found comfort in their skin, right? There were others around that cared about them and would stand up for them and would stand beside them. And that's really the value and the beauty of Haddonfield Memorial High School. They were, tribute to the high school, like they were well prepared for college. I mean, both of them have enjoyed their time, for the most part in college, and have found themselves, found the areas that they care about. They both have so far stayed with what they decided to study. And a lot of that comes from just the level of preparation, deep preparation that they had, I think, here at the high school. The reality is often we'll travel to cities, towns, places, whether it's casually or as a tourist. But when you start to dig deeper and understand the history of other cultures, in this particular case, Black culture in the town, you start to learn more and feel closer on a deeper level to what made the town what it is. And so I had no idea that there was such a thing as Black Haddonfield. I thought it was the same Haddonfield that I came into in 2009. That shouldn't be the case. I shouldn't have to find that out, practically after my kids are in college, right? And it's a value not just for Black people, it's a value for everyone to kind of understand, so this was this community, this is the history, this is actually the history of the town, right? And to understand that and to value it is important. My greatest fear in elementary school, given the experience I just shared, was that I just was never going to fit in. I just assumed that I was always going to be a square peg and just, always somewhere off to the side. And that was a huge, huge fear that carried with me into middle school. I think my greatest fear in high school, even though with hindsight I did well in high school, I didn't know that I was doing well. That the kid in elementary school was still the kid in high school. It's just that I was in a different setting, and people were recognizing. So I was in the right classes, but I was still the same person inside. So my fear was that I would graduate and not know what I would be able to do. Luckily, I had there was a teacher who wasn't my teacher. There are a lot of teacher themes in everything that I say because of the impact, I think, on my life and the life of my family, but who decided day one that they were going to take it upon themselves to believe in me until I could believe in myself. And they would, every day, they would tell me I was going to college, and I would look at them and say, no, no one else in my family did that. I'm not doing that. They won. I ended up going. So I think, but those were fears. And I think the other one really was just about growing up in this world as a Black male and knowing that, I can tell you even to this day, I'm going to say most, it's not most, a great deal of my friends growing up didn't make it as long as I did. Many of them didn't make it to 30 years old. Some of them didn't make it to 20, right? I've been to, more funerals than I'd like to ever have to go to in a lifetime, right? And so those were part of my fears growing up and part of the reason for trying to find ways to do other things that wouldn't be in my life. Even in my own family, so we were had three sisters, one brother that was 7 years older than me, and I was the youngest. My freshman year in college, my brother died of gun violence. And so it was not just out there, it was also in our family. And I know what the potential was because we were all together. We weren't different. There was nothing different about me. It just so happened that I had a slightly different pathway. I had one or two more people who cared about my future than they did. It was all about those who were surrounding me. I talked about the teacher that believed in me till I could believe in myself. Like, that's what caused the difference for me. Otherwise, that same bored kid in elementary school could have ended up very differently because I didn't fit in. I knew I was different. When you see me, you're looking at a miracle. I'm not supposed to be here, but I am. Because nothing about when I look at my path and their path, it's not different. And so when people look at the epidemic of gun violence and say, hey, well, those were bad people, it's like, no, that's actually not true. And so being surrounded by that, being surrounded by the understanding that of being hopeless in not only your community context, but hopeless in the context of thinking that, one opportunity in a car being pulled over by a police officer, you may lose your life, right? And we all grow up with that. Like, we all grow up with this idea of that light throws a trauma through your body like you wouldn't imagine. So it's not just a stop. It's never just a stop. Absolutely, you have to have a talk about, hey, you're going to this place and it's dark, or you're going into a store to return things, return them first and then go, even though other people may come in with returns, shop, and then return, you don't do that, right? So there are all these different double standard kind of conversations that you have because you know of what you've experienced. And this is generational, right? And I've experienced it myself, obviously. Like, I experienced it in North Carolina. I experienced it on a trip to Mississippi in graduate school. I experienced it when I first came to Haddonfield, right? So there's no place that you don't experience it. There's more instances of members of the community supporting and affirming and creating groups around anti-racist behavior and really supporting history as, just like with this project, the history of Black families in Haddonfield. So all of these things that are happening now were not happening in 2009, right? And so these are all positive developments. I do see a shift, and I think that it will continue. It takes time. It takes people who live here to actually own it and really want to make it a better place. You have to create environments of belonging, and not just racial belonging, right? But certainly a place where if your hair is different, if your skin is different, like you feel like you belong. And I think it often starts with, who you have in administration, who you have as teachers, who you surround them with, the opportunities that you surround them with, the clubs that they're surrounded with. I have great faith in the actual generation of students that are coming through now. I am not worried about them at all. I really look at them just like I look at those 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds that were civil rights leaders, right, in the 60s. Like they're going to be fine. I think it's time for the adults to step up and really create the environment that can actually accelerate that. I've witnessed such a transformation going from, again, like being in a community that was very different, where she was very different, where I knew that she had great capacity beyond what I could ever imagine. And I say that also for my son, Jesse, as well, but we're talking in this particular case about Jada. I knew that. And I often worried about her believing in herself and really understanding what her parents saw in her, what her friends saw in her, what teachers saw in her. She just couldn't, it didn't click. In my opinion, it didn't click because of just the broader experience. I think it was her sophomore year, she entered into a contest, which we were shocked because Jada would never, she just didn't do things like that because she always worried about, like, she'd say things like, well, I'm never going to win anyway. Like that was Jada. Like, I'm never going to, that was the way she felt about things. But in the 10th grade, there was a Martin Luther King essay contest. And she had just had a conversation, I think in December, with my father, who has since passed away. And he talked to her about his life growing up and the challenges of getting educated. And she was in the 10th grade. I mean, I didn't, sometimes you don't know when people are listening, when your kids are listening or not. She wrote her essay. She wrote it about him. And something happened. She won. And all of a sudden, the Jada that didn't believe started believing. And then she said, hey, I think I might run for junior class. And we're like, what? You serious? In Haddonfield? Right? She's like, yeah, I'm not. It's nothing. I'm just going to try it. And she became junior class. I'm sorry, student government vice president. And we're like, okay. And then senior year, or at the end of their ran again, and then became student class president. To see that transformation between the 10th grade and 12th grade, and to know that it is possible for young people to go from not believing to believing and executing it. And to see that same child yesterday that I had lunch with at Penn, it's just different, right? I witnessed transformation right in front of my eyes. And that's why it's emotional because it ties back to generations. It's not just her. It ties back to me. It ties back to my parents who were born on sharecropper farms, who had kids throwing rocks to them trying to get to school when they went to school in the morning because they had to go to the black school and the other kids went to the white school and the white kids would throw rocks at them. Like when you know all of those stories and you realize that story that my father told this generation of daughter who listened and then wrote about it and then won, and then all of a sudden all these other things happened. Like it's like a movie. Like you don't believe it.
Always be proud of what you've overcome, and always be proud of all the battles you've won, and always be proud of all of your darkest days, the tears you held back when you walked away, and always be proud of your mom and your dad, and whatever affair that they had. Always be proud of your very first kiss, and always be proud of every friend that you miss. Always be proud, and let your heart